Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. Um, so that kind of threw me off because that was a wrong intro bumper.
You hit the wrong button, Eric.
Anyway, I'm Eric, the IT guy Hendricks, one of your hosts here today, and joining me is my esteemed colleague, Mr. Nate Lager.
Esteemed, man. Don't give me an inflated head this early in the episode.
Oh gosh, that really threw me off. Yeah, so this is not Into the Terminal, but this is RHEL Presents episode number 80. At long last, I know we've had scheduling issues, we've had people drop sick, and just weird things, but glad to be back in the RHEL Presents chair, even though we introduced RHEL Presents or as Into the
Into the
Terminal.
terminal.
But here we are. We're going to talk
Back on track, Eric.
about. I'm trying. I'm so trying.
Reset.
Nate, save me and tell the good people what we're going to be talking about today.
So today we've got some guests from Yubico, and we're going to talk about a new feature in RHEL's IDM or Identity Manager suite that'll let you add passkeys, that is FIDO compliant hardware tokens, to users and centrally manage them so that you can have them log into things like your RHEL environment and whatnot. Now, relatively new feature, right? So there's still features in the works, and maybe we'll touch on that as the episode goes on. But we've got some demos. We're going to chat quite a bit with the Yubico folks, and I think it's going to be a good episode.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And we started this conversation around Red Hat Summits, the release of 9.4. Really put a lot of the features we need in place. We've got a few demos, and we've also got some videos that Nate recorded from already on the channel. So plenty of content for you to take home and play with this yourself. So without further ado, let's bring in our friends from Yubico. Gentlemen, welcome to RHEL Presents.
Not
Yeah, not
Hello.
Into the Terminal. Represents. Hey, I was back on track, Nate. Don't derail me, sir.
All right, I'll stop.
So, Jonathan, why don't you introduce yourself, and then Dave will get you as well.
Cool. And if Nate doesn't want it, I will take that esteemed title. Hey, everyone. My name's Jonathan Hanlon. I manage partnerships here at Yubico. I've been here for about a year and a half now. Prior to joining Yubico, I was with Microsoft, focused on partner projects there for about 16 years. Through most of my career, partnerships have been my focus, and I enjoy the opportunities to meet with companies like Red Hat, meet great guys like Eric and Nate. And that said, I'm happy to be here today with Dave, Eric, and Nate to be on RHEL Presents. I'd like to add, if I can, a fun thing about me. So a few years ago, my wife and I had a unique opportunity to tour a house that's named after somebody in my family. Hanlon is not a common name, so when it jumps up, I notice. The house is in San Francisco. It was built in 1881, survived the fire of 1906. Has a cool little historical plaque attached to it. So, of course, living nearby, my wife and I went and checked it out a few years ago. Right place, right time kind of a situation. The owner of the house was coming out the front door just as we were taking pictures of the plaque at the bottom of the stairs. Shared that I'm a Hanlon. She invited us in, and we spent about 2 hours checking out the entire house. Amazing place. Interesting little piece of history to it, too, as well. The back part of the house, where there's a separate apartment for a tenant in the basement, actually has a piece of building that was in the 1915 San Francisco Panama Exposition. So took it from that, put it on the back of the house, and whoever this tenant is has a really cool piece of history as their living room.
That's crazy.
I can't say that anyone's ever built a house with my family name on it. Although I will say that not too far out of town, there is a piece of property for sale that I really want to get my hands on because it's on Hendricks Lane, and it's even spelled correctly. Got the CKS, and I feel like I should get in there and buy it before it comes off the market. But I have.
Or
99% has nothing to do with my family.
I have an entire type of beer that's named after my family name, so it doesn't work at bars though. I've tried. Anyway, Dave.
How many people call you Lager?
Everybody.
Hard to follow, like all this historical context from John. But Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Dave Pham. I'm a senior solutions architect also at Yubico, working with partners like Red Hat and also internally across the org to help sort of design, integrate, facilitate cooperation between our products and our key partners. The role is quite varied since I'm also involved in sort of driving our corporate messaging around passkeys, helping to build out the ecosystem, and figuring out how government regulations and mandates affect sort of Yubico's market position, particularly in Europe, which is sort of where I'm based. I'm in Stockholm. I joined Yubico 5 years ago, basically to the day, I think. And 18 months of those probably spent working alongside the good folks at Red Hat. So I'm really stoked to have this passkey feature sort of generally available within 9.4. Finally, it took a lot of effort behind the scenes to get it rolled out there. I don't have a sort of a long historical story to share like Jono, but I guess interesting fact about me is that I was born and raised in Australia. Also spent a number of years living in the US, in New York, and traveled sort of a great deal around the continent. Like I said, I'm based in Sweden currently, been living here for about 10 years now. And originally I came to Europe on a gap year. Sort of the goal was to backpack through sort of from London all the way through to like Warsaw, basically just sort of make my way through. And the last few years I've kind of settled down a lot, especially the pandemic. It's sort of, obviously the crazy period in our history where travel sort of went to a standstill and kind of got really cool. And yeah, it's been a blast there. I love living in Europe and it's good times.
Yeah, I know how that feels. I used to take a trip every year, and pandemic and children kind of put a stop to that.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
All right, so based on the chat that I've seen already, pretty sure most folks know who Yubico is, and probably most familiar with the Yubikey. But in case there's some crazy people out in the etherwebs that haven't heard of Yubico, why don't you all just kind of introduce your company a little bit? Tell us a little bit about what Yubico is about.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. So Yubico is a company that was founded back in 2007 in Stockholm by a great couple who saw a need for improved security, and fast forward 15 plus years, the Yubikey is now a staple of phishing resistant hardware. We've been instrumental in developing global standards for secure and convenient access to computers, mobile devices, online accounts. We've been pioneers in the efforts to contribute to FIDO2, WebAuthn, FIDO Universal Second Factor, Open Authentication standards. Our mission is to make the internet safer for everyone. Our technology offers a robust solution, as I said, for phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication, which is essentially protecting against account takeovers.
That's awesome.
Dave, you want to add anything to that?
I'm trying to think of what else is. Well, okay, I guess maybe, I don't know, Nate, do you have, I don't actually have a Yubikey handy. I can grab one. Just this one. Jonathan, you got one? So yeah.
There we go.
Eric, everyone's probably.
I'm sorry, mine's at my other desk.
Everybody but the SA has one.
I don't have one within reach either. But I mean, I guess we won't have to go into all the details. I think there's a slide there with sort of all the form factors and different versions that we sort of have on offer. But I mean, okay, so without diving too deep, it's a hardware authentication device that supports a bunch of protocols mentioned in the bottom left there of that slide. U2F and FIDO2 probably being the most prominent, although we have things like OTPs that are very sort of popular to use in use. Smart card, another very popular protocol. But yeah, it's the flagship product of Yubico, and yeah, it sort of offers enterprise and individuals alike strong two-factor, multi-factor, and passwordless authentication. It's very easy to use. You basically plug and touch it, or if you're using a mobile device, you can tap it using NFC. And a lot of it, obviously, depending on what protocol you're using, it's public private key cryptography. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to dive into that whole thing right now, maybe a bit later, but yeah, that's essentially the core technology of the Yubikey.
Yeah, I'm very proud of. It's been retired from service now, but I actually have a Yubikey with the GitLab logo on it. So I before I came to Red Hat, I worked for GitLab, and was pretty strong partnership between Yubico and GitLab. So I've got a Yubikey with GitLab logo on it. I'm really proud of it. But
there's a few folks in our company who sort of have like a museum of Yubikey editions that are kind of either very limited or they don't exist anymore, like the GitLab one. You've got a whole bunch of other ones that are kind of etched with the different logos and things like that, different form factors. We've got some crazy colors as well. I don't know if you've seen like clear ones and things like that.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And I should get a clear one.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing I learned from 1990s cyber thrillers, it's that transparent electronics are the thing, right? So that's what I need.
So we kind of talked about who Yubico is. We talked about what a Yubikey is. So what is the problem that the Yubikey is trying to solve? I mean, obviously it handles passwords and whatnot, but what is the kind of the driver behind the Yubikey?
Yeah, Jono, do you want me to handle this, or you? Or...
You go ahead, start. Yep.
Okay, so I'm just kind of I don't know where to start. There's so much sort of going through my head, but essentially, account takeovers and hacking and things like that, they're sort of very prominent these days. You see it a lot in the news, and there are a number of people working in the field of sort of MFA in particular, or not even MFA, just authentication, I should say, and just sort of figuring out ways to improve that whole thing, either from a technological point of view or from a UX point of view, right? So everyone knows about password. That's kind of like the basis of the internet. Is that any kind of account you create online, you more or less use a password, right? But as like I said, it is attacks, and these attackers become more prominent. People have figured out that basically passwords aren't good enough. You know, someone can look over your shoulder if you're at a coffee store, for example, or there are more sophisticated things like they phish you, they'll send you an email, or I don't know, they'll phone you up and they pretend to be from an IT help desk, or even this whole thing with CrowdStrike, this whole crazy thing where there were people sending sort of phishing emails and saying, hey, contact us and we'll sort of help you resolve these issues. And obviously they weren't coming from CrowdStrike, they were coming from a bunch of sort of scammy people, right? So what the Yubikey does, and maybe I should say Yubikey, I should say passkeys in general, and sort of technologies of that ilk. They're introducing another way to authenticate that is way more secure than the password, because a remote attacker can't just look over your shoulder, for example, or sort of email you a link or anything like that, and then you can like mistakenly send your credentials to them. Because, for example, if you talk about the Yubikey, you're going to need this sort of hardware that plugs into your device or taps into your device, which they don't have access to. So it's basically impossible for them to log on. Obviously there's a whole lot of mathematics and cryptography involved in the under the hood of that. So I've kind of simplified it a little bit, but yeah, it's essentially what we're trying to do is to stop remote attacks. Just put in a nutshell.
Yeah, there's an adage that I think a lot of your audience has probably heard before, that MFA combines at least two of the following elements. It's something like your password, something you have, the security token, and something you are, your finger. So with the Yubikey, it covers those bases to authenticate and validate that you are the one authenticating in, not a phished account that has stolen credentials and an attacker that is going to leverage those to attack your system. And that's really why MFA is so important. It enhances your organization's security by requiring those users to identify themselves with more than just that username and password. While important, username and passwords, as Dave pointed out, are vulnerable to brute force attacks and can be stolen. So enforcing the use of MFA, like the Yubikey, provides increased confidence that your organization will stay safe from cyber criminals and won't be prone to these kind of phishing attacks.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line here is that passwords were the way we did this in the past, but they're kind of broken, right? I mean, the number of phishing attempts that I've seen in my career as an IT professional, and the number of people that I thought should know better that have been phished, including myself, by the way, right, tells me that the fish is getting good enough. It used to be easy to spot, you know, broken English, terrible grammar, logos that didn't look right, you know, questions that seem suspicious. They've caught on, and they're doing so much better. And in the world today where you can ask AI to write you anything in any dialect you want, I mean, you need something better than a password now, right? And especially not a weak password like a lot of people are tending to do.
You read my mind, Nate. AI is prevalent now in as a tool that attackers are leveraging to build phishing attacks that are not easily discernible, and even an expert may not see the advancements that they've made and will fall for one as well. So having that extra layer is definitely a recommendation and our mission.
Well, and one of the problems with passwords has always been user compliance, because no matter how difficult you set the rules, no matter how frequently they have to change, no matter how many days of warning that you give, you always have those advanced violators who I have to pick a password that I haven't used the last 7 times, and they'll sit there and they'll change their password 7 times to get back to the one that they want to keep. And and while passwords are a great idea, it's just it doesn't meet the need anymore. And excuse me. And so moving more into this space of passwordless and having a key, something that you have and can hold, will really help solve a lot of these problems. And it's great to see companies like Yubico out there ahead of this, trying to solve that problem for our users.
And not to mention the users. Yes, there's the rotation thing, but then there's, oh, it's time to change my password. I have to change it every 6 months, right? Well, let's see. It's currently summer 2024. That actually meets a lot of complexity requirements, because you can put a capital letter in there. It's got numbers in it, maybe add a space or a special character, and you're done. Really easy to guess, right? Like, this is a joke within the information security field. That's how easy it is to guess. But so many people do it that, you'll get a hit on it, right? This helps solve that, because even if I set the password to summer 2024, if I also require the Yubikey, or if the Yubikey is my authentication method, right? And it's not, I don't need the password. Maybe we'll talk about pins and whatnot in a bit, but it takes that onus off of the account owner, who maybe doesn't care because they're just trying to get their job done. That's the other thing to remember, is that these folks, your users are not security professionals. You can't expect them to be security professionals. You can hammer into them all you want how important it is to have a secure password. But when they're just trying to get logged in because they've got to update that slide deck for a sales presentation, and they have to change their password, they're going to do it as quick as they can, so they're not going to forget it in 15 minutes. So,
Yeah, and then the other common thing is that there's a whole thing about credential stuffing. So before I was a user of the Yubikey, you'd pick a sort of a sufficiently complicated password, and then you'd sort of reuse that to like 10 of your favorite sites. And if any of those sites got compromised, the attackers probably have your email address that you use to log on for that particular account. Then they have obviously the password, and then they could sort of go across and try attempt these other sites, these other Amazon or Gmail or whatever it is, these sort of common services. And hey, they might sort of the jackpot, because then they kind of can move laterally across all these different things and then sort of build a picture of you and store all your data and things like that.
All I can say is the security industry needs to figure this out, because over the last couple of years, I went through my entire password vault and changed it to randomized passphrases instead of passwords that are just random characters and digits. And now we're going to passwordless. So y'all need to make up your minds, because there's no easy task to go to 200 or 300 sites and change passwords. So every site's unique, and as long as I have access to my password vault, I'm gold. But yeah, Yubikey is definitely something I need to reintroduce, especially now that I'm traveling more. Now that going back and working for an afternoon at a restaurant is becoming a thing again. It was one thing post pandemic when I never left the space. But now that I'm out in public more often with my technology, I need to reintroduce a lot of those security practices, and the Yubikey seems like a great way to go.
We've done a lot of talking. Should we go ahead and do some demos? What do you think?
I'm all for it. So why don't we introduce, before we demo, why don't we introduce the demo? Nate, you want to talk to us a little bit about what Red Hat's identity solution is?
Sure. So IDM, it's included with RHEL. So if you've got a RHEL subscription, you've got IDM. So don't be telling me that it costs too much money or something. If I were to summarize this in a sentence, it's like Active Directory for Linux. It's basically a collection of services, includes a Kerberos domain, an LDAP backend, a number of other pieces that are kind of glued together to make this thing do basically what Active Directory does for Windows, which is it manages identities, it manages access for those identities, right? So I can say these users have access to these hosts. Hosts get joined in the same way that you join a Windows machine to a Windows domain. Linux machines get joined to a IDM domain. And I can even manage what those users can do on those hosts, right? So I can do things like apply pseudo rules. I can do things like say these users can access this set of systems. Those users can access that other set of systems. You know, the usual example, I've got, I don't know, a team of web developers and a team of database admins. Well, the database admins don't need high elevation or highly elevated privileges on the web team's systems and vice versa. I can define all that with an IDM, and then I don't have to worry about, assigning groups and access and whatnot at the host level, right? It just makes everything so much simpler. Obviously, there's other ways to get that stuff done through automation, through local accounts, but this just makes it so much simpler. You know, Joe leaves the company, I turn off Joe's account. Bob comes in to replace Joe, I make Bob an account, I give him the access that Joe used to have, right? All nice and central. Now, the reason we're talking about IDM today is because the way we've implemented this passkey support is through IDM users, right? So I can make an IDM user, I can attach a Yubikey or a passkey, FIDO compliant passkey to the user, and then that passkey becomes the way they authenticate to systems. It's pretty slick.
So one of the things we announced at Summit was the ability to use Red Hat Identity Manager and a Yubikey in order to authenticate to your RHEL systems, and that is now that we've laid the groundwork there. Now we can jump into our demo here, Nate.
Yep. So the first demo I've got set up here is this is the IDM web console. This is logged in as an administrated user. Users themselves can also log into this portal. That way they can do things like set their password and things like that. But I'm logged in as an admin right now. That's why I've got access to all of these tabs at the top. And you can see I've got a couple of users in here already. But just to kind of walk through some of those things that I talked about, here's hosts that I have registered. This is a demo domain, so I've only got my directory server and then my client connected to it. Things like what services are running on those, what policies do I want to apply to them. I can set my password policy through here, right? This is host-based access control here. You can see I have it set to allow all, which basically says all my users can access all my systems, but you can obviously get a lot more fine-grained than that. This is the thing I was talking about with pseudo rules. Again, I don't have any rules set up in here because I didn't configure any But basically, you can set up pseudo rules in here that say these users can do these things with super user privileges and whatnot. I'm not going to give you like a full tour of everything that IDM can do because that really isn't the point today. I just wanted to give people a little bit of familiarity with it before we get started.
And
But I did want to
it's
show
actually
you
linked to a RHEL Presents episode where Brian and I interviewed Nate himself to talk about Identity Manager. And I believe we have an identity management mini series coming up here in a few months. So there'll be plenty of time to dive in deeper.
It's almost like we're planning that. But in the episode of RHEL Presents that Eric's referring to, I actually went through and set up an IDM domain using nothing but Ansible roles, right? So you might think this sounds really complicated to set up. Kind of isn't. You can just define stuff inside of an Ansible playbook and fire it off, and it'll set the thing up for you. It'll even register your clients and set up replicas, all kinds of great stuff in there. All right, so what I wanted to do was I'm going to walk through the web UI, manually adding another user, and then we're going to carry that into mapping a passkey to that user, and then I'll show you what it looks like to actually log in with that user. So we might as well just go kind of one at a time here. So you can see I've got a bunch of users already. We've got Michael and Murphy and Ramirez, and we're going to add in Harry because if anyone's catching my references, you have to have Harry. Okay, so all we're going to give Harry is his required fields at this point. We gave him a user login. We're going to give him a name and a last name, first name and last name. And I'm not going to set anything else here. I'm not even going to give him a password yet because I'm going to use just the passkey for this user. And you might say, but wait, hold on. We want more than one authentication mechanism. We're going to talk about that in a second, so don't worry about that. So we're going to add him in. And after he's been added, you'll see I now have Harry in the list here. Now, here's all the things I can set for a user. I can give them their job title. I can give them initials, their phone number. This is everything you'd expect to find in an employee directory, right? So that's the way this is designed to work. You can see that they've got their full principal here, including the domain name. This is just idm0.lab, but that would be whatever your domain is that you've set up. Imagine this is like idm.yourcompany.com, right? Sets his home directory. You can do things like map in remote home directories over NFS. I don't have any of that complexity set up here. What I am going to do is turn on passkey authentication for Harry. Now, I could do this in the command line, which is where I'm going to map the passkey, but I'm going to do it through the web UI here just because it's a simple checkbox right here. I can also do things in here like set his password, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. But again, we're going to make this as simple as possible. I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what else you can see in here. All right, so I think up at the top here is our save button. And now Harry's account is set to use a passkey, but we haven't actually mapped a passkey to it yet. Now, you can get the identifier from the passkey and enter it. I'm blanking on where the field is here, but there's a field here where you can put the identity from the passkey into the web UI. There's also work being done to improve this workflow so that you can map the passkey through the web UI for administrators who like to do it that way in a more automated way, right? So imagine you're provisioning a new employee or something. You're setting up their account. You have the passkey in your hand because you're ready to map it, and then you're going to give it to them as their authentication mechanism. You can then map it right through the web UI. But today, we don't have that feature just yet. All right, so that's user Harry, right? Now, again, we haven't mapped any passkey to him yet. So if we head over to my IDM console, my client over here, make sure I have all my stuff ready to go here. We're going to take, this is just a VM on my laptop over here. So sorry if I'm away from the mic. I'm going to try to make sure I speak into the mic. It's on the other side of my desk. But this is just a client in my IDM domain. It's that one we saw under hosts that was just CLI0. We're going to, first of all, we're going to initialize an administrative session right here on the command line. Now, I could have logged into this system as an IDM admin, but I didn't. I've logged in as a local administrator user. So we're going to do kinit admin. And then I need to authenticate as my administrator. So give me just a second here. Even though this is my lab, I have a relatively long password.
It's actually summer_2024. Just so you all know.
There's an exclamation point in there. You know. All right, so now I've actually authenticated as the IDM admin, right? So this is the IDM account. If you remember from the list of users on my other screen, that one at the top was just admin. That's who I've authenticated as here. So if I did a K-list, you'll see I now have a Kerberos session, Kerberos ticket as the admin user, right? If you look up here, admin at idm0.lab. Okay, so now we're going to modify Harry's account. We're going to go IPA. So it's a whole suite of command line tools that are underneath this IPA command. You can manage users, add users, delete users, all through the command line, just like we did through the web UI over there. But we're just going to do a user -add -passkey. And then we're going to say --register, which tells it to kick off this scenario where it looks for a local Yubikey or local FIDO key, and then it'll register from what it sees on the local USB bus. And then we're going to give it the name of the account that we want to modify, which was just Harry. Okay. And you're going to see here, it's asking me for a PIN. Now, this is what I was talking about before. Oh, you're just using the Yubikey. Well, the Yubikey is also locked with a PIN. And you set that using the Yubikey manager tools, which I don't know, maybe if we have time, we can show you later. But I've set this to a PIN here. And all I do is type it in, hit enter, and then it's going to say, touch the device. Now, you can't see this because there's no way I can show it to you, but the Yubikey right now is flashing. That's how I know I got to hit the button. So I'm going to hit the button, and you'll see it's red from the Yubikey. It's mapped that into my IDM user. The Harry user now has this key mapped to him. And at this point, you're actually ready to authenticate as Harry. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to log out of this machine. And I hope this doesn't mess up the share. It shouldn't. But you know how that goes. Yeah, we're going to log out. Okay. Now it's going to bring us back to this is just a RHEL 9.4 system. We're going to log in as a not listed user, Harry, at idm0.lab. We hit enter, and this is another thing they're working on improving, this login situation. You can see in the password field, it says insert your passkey device, and then it kind of trails off. What it's saying is, and then press enter. So I've inserted the key already. I'm now pressing enter. Now it says enter my PIN. Same PIN I used before. I hit enter. And now, again, it doesn't tell you anything on the screen. Again, this is being improved, but the Yubikey itself is flashing. So I'm going to hit the button on the Yubikey. And it's giving me a warning about the TGT. But what it's going to do here is actually authenticate and give me a login for this brand new user in my domain. And there you go. I didn't have to give it a password. All I would have, imagine that I was going through an employee onboarding workflow for Harry. I registered as Yubikey. Then I gave the Yubikey to Harry and said, okay, you're ready to log in. And there you go. He's ready to log in. So I think it's a pretty cool feature. I hope people in chat agree. Looks like Jeff in chat got my reference. Thank you.
I didn't until you added Harry. So those books are actually pretty high on my reading list. So,
so
Dave, Jonathan, go ahead.
Sorry,
I still have no idea where these characters are from. I'm out of the loop.
This is the Dresden Files book series by Jim Butcher. So check them out. They're good. If you like urban fantasy, check them out.
So Jim, if you're watching this, we little cash Nate's way for this.
I'd like some royalty checks.
So, Jonathan, Dave, thoughts? What do you think?
It's fantastic and tees up greatly one of the great benefits of a Yubikey, which is that passwordless authentication. Of course, you get your username and account set up, with that username and password, but taking that extra step to have that passwordless access just makes life so much easier for the end user. One of the things we are working towards as well that's going to hopefully be of a beneficial improvement for users is what we're calling our Yubico FIDO Pre-reg. We currently have this in a beta phase right now, but what we're working towards is actually making it to where those credentials can be set up on the Yubikey for the user before it's even shipped to them, so that when they get their Yubikey in the mail, let's say you got a new, Harry's a brand new employee, he gets his new laptop, he gets sent to Yubikey. The Yubikey would then be pre-provisioned with everything that he needs to go, so they could just take it right out of the package, follow the setup instructions, and begin working right away without having to leverage IT time to going through and setting that up. But again, that's something that we're working towards. Hopefully we'll have broader awareness for that soon, but just something I did want to share that we're working towards to even make it easier for users to onboard.
Yeah, let's add a little bit to that as well. So I guess, Nick, what you were demonstrating is kind of like an on behalf, right? You're registering a key on behalf of a user in the IT admin role. So one of the beautiful things about FIDO2 and YubiKeys is that generally, obviously, I know that, like you said, you're still expanding the feature set within RHEL, right? But if you talk about sort of generally, FIDO2 kind of allows the users to control how to register, when to register, and sort of what accounts to associate with the YubiKeys, for example, right? So a lot of services, you can add a passkey, then you insert the passkey on by yourself. You don't need someone to do it on your behalf. And then, and I don't know, in that little demo window that you had, it spat out this sort of long string, right? Essentially, what that is the public key, right? And the private key itself is on the hardware, and there's no way to extract it. Essentially, it lives on the secure element in the key. So even if you wanted to divulge that to an attacker, or even your mom or something, you couldn't, because there's actually no way to retrieve that in clear text, or So yeah, so the beautiful thing is that you can choose what services to register the key, as you like. So you're in control of how and where to use it.
So this kind of leads me to a question, and I apologize, this is kind of off script, but you've got my brain going down the what if my YubiKey is stolen or lost? Could someone, if they had physical access to that key and knowledge, right, not just some random thug, right, but someone who's actually familiar with cryptography and whatnot, could they somehow abuse that key to get that private key out of there? Or is it truly like, no way, that's locked in there, you can't get it?
So yes, as far as I know, there's no way. And I think that includes physical tampering. So we've obviously done internal testings and things like that. The hardware team, like sort of jimming open the plastic case and trying to get into it. And I don't think it's easy anyway. I wouldn't say it's impossible, because obviously people always think that's
right,
possible, and then there's always some attacker who sort of figures out a way or a
impossible. Challenge accepted.
So, but very challenging to even, to basically access it, even if you physically compromise the device. From a sort of a software point of view, there's no way, because essentially there's no function within the key that sort of, so if you think of it as an API, there's no get function. There's no like
right.
Get the private key. There's no such
thing. You can't
right?
just ask the Yubikey nicely to give you its private key.
Right, and yeah, exactly. And sort of going back to the whole thing about the pin is there to gate the release of the credentials, right? So unless someone who's stolen your Yubikey also knows the pin, they can't even access like sort of the functions on the key itself, because the pin will then unlock those functions, and then you can sort of do things with it, right?
Cool, good answer. Sorry for going off script.
Yeah. Well,
I just figured if the question came up in my brain, there might be someone in the audience who's thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for Yubico, and then I've got a question for Nate. So first off, Billy asks, does Yubico work with desktop password managers?
I'll take that one. Short answer is yes, and this actually is one of my core responsibilities here at Yubico, which is the Works with Yubikey catalog. This is our repository where we have all of the integrations where you can use your Yubikey, Red Hat, Enterprise Linux, included with all of the helpful information that you need to set up your Yubikey. But for password managers, we actually have an entire specific category dedicated to password managers. We work with about, I want to say, at least a dozen more different password managers. So I won't name drop anybody, but yes, all of the major ones work with Yubikeys.
I'll say I just protected my own password vault, which is through Bitwarden. I don't mind saying so, with a Yubikey, and it worked. It worked really nice. In fact, I used one of them that has an NFC capability, so I can scan it on my phone instead of having to carry around a USB adapter to plug it into my iPhone with. So
Nice.
I haven't looked at what else it works on, but it works on Bitwarden.
Yeah, that was my question as well, because I use Bitwarden for everything right now.
Bitwarden will even let you make a software token in there to use to authenticate other devices, which is essentially why I thought, maybe I should lock this down even better than the ridiculously long password I currently use.
And then for Nate, got a question from Chuck in our audience today. What if my laptop, which is IDM managed, is away from my IDM server? So Chuck goes on to mention, like at the coffee shop we were the fictitious coffee shop we were talking about.
Yeah. So if we're talking about registering users, you have to be able to talk to the IDM server. But if you're talking about, the machine I just logged in with, right? As long as I've logged in with it in the past, it caches those credentials within SSSD, I believe it is, on the client side. So if I'm disconnected, I can still authenticate to my laptop. But, if I need to do things like update my account, or if I need to refresh any access rules that have been applied to me on the IDM side, those, of course, won't come down to my system until I can reach the IDM server again. Hope that answers the question.
I think so. Yeah, and that's been true of a lot of identity management products I've come across. As long as you've logged in once, your credentials are cached on the local machine, and I'm sure there's some kind of timeout that if you don't communicate with the IDM server every 7 days or whatever the timeout might be, that as long as you check in every so often, that you can connect remotely.
Yeah. And the other neat thing, I didn't get to cover this in the demo because I wasn't thinking of it, but that authentication mechanism with the key will also work over SSH. Or no, sorry, SSH isn't what I'm thinking of. SSH will use your Kerberos token or the SSH key that you've stored on the IDM server. What I was trying to say was sudo. If I try to do a sudo escalation on a client, and I have the sudo permission, it'll use the Yubikey to authenticate me to sudo, which I thought was pretty cool. I was really happy when I saw that worked. And there's a bunch of other use cases where it'll do that. As if it can't use the Kerberos ticket, it'll use the Yubikey or whatever other authentication mechanisms you have defined within IDM.
So Nate, Eric, I've got a question for both of you. I met you both a few months ago. I hope the answer is yes. Met you both a few months ago. I've learned a lot about Red Hat over the past few months and in our lead up to the event and afterwards. With RHEL, is there you've demonstrated on a desktop, is there a mobile environment for it as well that users can leverage, or is it just all primarily desktop, laptop oriented for managing your RHEL environment?
So we've got the RHEL web console, which you can use through a mobile web browser, which, by the way, if you authenticate to a RHEL system through the web console, it'll also use those IDM authentication mechanisms. So I actually had a user test it because I didn't get a chance to myself. It'll even use the Yubikey to log you in there. So, but yeah, there is a mobile UI for management that uses the RHEL web console, which is a web UI that works pretty well.
Gotcha. I do ask because I have a reason, another thing that with the Yubikey that I wanted to bring up, especially the Yubikey 5 that we've been sharing and demonstrating. And you notice it has the cool little plug that works well with those mobile devices that are USB-C enabled. But the Yubikey also has NFC built in, which allows you to leverage and authenticate in on mobile devices as well. So When you're tapping, as you demonstrated, when the light goes green, hold it to the back of your phone, and you can also authenticate it with the Yubikey over the air that way as well.
Yep. Yeah, when I was talking about my password manager, that's exactly how I use it for my mobile device. Because it doesn't have a USB or USB-C plug. It's the old Apple Lightning or whatever. And I don't have a Yubikey that fits that. And I didn't want to carry an adapter around. So definitely the NFC feature works on that.
That's so cool. So we've got about 15 minutes left. And honestly, we've jumped around the episode guide as I kind of expected we would. So I will leave it up to Jonathan and Dave to kind of pick how we round out the episode. We've got a couple of other demos, I think, Nate, or if there's something forward facing we want to talk about, I'll leave it up to our guests.
Yeah. So the other thing that what I could show is the Yubikey Manager app, which I used to set the pin on the device that I used earlier today. If anyone's curious about that, I can poke around that a little bit. I don't know if there's any other comments or questions or anything that Jonathan or Dave wanted to bring up first.
Nope. Demo away.
Yeah,
cool. Well, let me switch over to the demo key here. So I got to pull it out of the laptop and plug it into the desktop. All right, let me switch my share around.
Behind the curtain.
Yeah, well, you know, this was the demo I scripted the least. This is more like a let's have a look. All right, here we go. So this is on my MacBook Pro. This is the Yubikey, what's it called? Yubikey Manager, right? And you can see it sees that I've got my Yubikey 5 NFC FIPS plugged in, and it tells me what version of the firmware it's got and the serial number for that particular device. I think what I wanted to show was here.
While you're bringing that up, Nate, Dave, I feel like we should talk about the firmware update. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
So you've actually got quite a sort of fossil of a key there, 543. I think we've got the latest updates, which I think it's coming out. Is it this month or like early next month? I think it is. So it's been pushed around a little bit, but the new one essentially is 5.7.2. So it's got a bunch of updates in there. So the most sort of key ones I would say is it incorporates CTAP 2.1. I don't know if that means a lot to a bunch of folks, but it's got a bunch of features in there. And probably the standout one is pin complexity. So you can now make it so that pins are say of 6 minimum length. You can also make it so that when users first get the key, they're forced to change the pin, so they don't just have the default pin. So that it's just adding sort of extra layers on top of what is a pretty secure solution. And there's a bunch of other features in there. I don't know if we need to get into all of it, but yeah, essentially 5.7.2. So have a look out for that one. So. And
5.7 also allows for the storage of up to now 100 keys, codes on the key, encryptions on the key, from was it 24 previously?
Correct. Yeah. So we've drastically increased the capacity of credentials you can store. FIDO. I should say FIDO credentials.
Cool. So yeah, this, I don't know. I don't feel like this key's that old, man. I guess the space is just moving that quickly. I could plug in my old key if you want. This is a Yubikey 4, I think. And I think it's got a much older firmware because I've had it for several years. You were talking about firmware. Can the firmware can't be flashed or updated on these, and that's a security mechanism, if I remember correctly, right?
It's a security mechanism. That's because we don't want, say, attackers or whoever to send out, hey, we've got a firmware update, and then they flash your key with sort of backdoors and things like that. So yeah, we don't do firmware updates. We just sell you a new key. If you want the latest features, go grab a new Yubikey.
And the prices aren't that crazy, right? So it's not like cost prohibitive to go buy a new key every so many years, I guess, is kind of my point there.
No. I think you can probably grab one. Like you look for sales and things like that, like $20 or something like that. It's not these days.
And you guys have keys.
Greatest is $55 US, and I almost hit add to cart until you said that there's a newer model coming out here in a month or so. So I'll have to keep an eye out for that.
And there's, if I remember correctly, there were inexpensive keys that were mainly for web authentication, for like, you know, I want to hand this out to my grandma who I just want to have slightly better security in her life.
Yeah, so for example, the $50 version that Eric's talking about, it probably has all the bells and whistles, right? It's got sort of OpenPGP, it's got OTP, it's got PIV, it's got everything, right? If you just want sort of basic FIDO authentication, I think it's just called the Yubikey security key. So the only thing it supports is basically web authent, like you said. That one is probably $20 already. So.
And just kind of skimming through the store, there's a number of different options. Yeah, the 5C NFC is $55 and pretty nice looking device. USB-C.
Yeah. Is there one for the
should have got one?
key? Should be one. It's called the Yubikey security key, I think it is.
Let's see. You can tell we went off script.
Security key series. There you go. So
yeah, we're totally off script.
$25 right there.
There you go.
All right, so Nate, before I drag us through it even further, why don't you and our friends at Yubico give us a quick tour of the manager?
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember where it was that I set the pin. I set this and forgot about how to do it. So I thought it was in here. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So I went into applications and then FIDO2, and then of course you can set your pin in here. I can change my pin, reset my pin, that kind of thing. What happens if I go through the 8 retries? Does it lock my key?
It will lock your key if you don't get the correct pin, yeah.
And then I can unlock it, I assume, with the manager. I hope.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I can't recall doing any testing that recently, but yeah, I believe you can unlock it.
That'd be great. I could just like toast my key.
Yeah, brick it for life.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the slots on these things? Because I know you can configure my older key, for example. I have 2 slots on it. One, they operate in different ways. One, I forget what the technologies they use, but
so
can you talk a little bit about what these slots do?
Yeah, so the slots basically are activated by touch. Yeah. So it actually says the short touch and the long touch. And the short touch is basically you just tap it. And most people have that set to default, which is the UBOTP. So to spit out this gibberish looking string, which is basically one-time password. And then the long touch is when you intentionally put your finger on it, and I think you hold it for 1 second, 2 seconds, then it'll do something else. And you can configure it to, say, for example, store a static password. You know, if you were so inclined to do so, then it would spit out that instead of the UBOTP.
So I could like
really
put
fun
my
is to do that by accident.
Slot. Sorry, go ahead.
What's really fun is to do that by accident when you have, say, Slack or something open and just hit enter, and then all of a sudden there's all this gibberish, and people are like, "Did you just have a stroke? Are you okay? Do we need to call somebody?"
The old Yubi sneeze.
Yeah, if you do not only on the Yubico Slack, like you get teased for that for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, if that happens, right? I've sent that string. That's a public. It's essentially like a public key, right? Or a public. It doesn't matter if someone gets that, is what I'm saying. That I haven't compromised my Yubikey by sending that.
It's just a one-time password. So I mean, it probably can be used for anything unless you've registered for that particular OTP to be seeded somewhere else. Right?
Right. So having just that, no one could like guess what the next OTP was going to come from my key is going to be or something like that.
No, not very easily. I didn't say impossible because you never know, but it's it's one of these things where it's very easy mathematically to go one way, very hard to go the other way.
Right. Quantum computing, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
It's breaking everything. All right, so yeah, I guess the only other thing I had here was you can turn on and off different interfaces to the key, which is what I'm showing here, which is, I guess, useful if there's certain things you don't want your key to do for whatever reason. Maybe you've got a reason you don't want it to do OAuth or something. You can turn that off, right? So helpful stuff. In fact, if I remember correctly, I had to turn on NFC on this key anyway. I don't know if it's on by default on your newer firmware since mine's such an ancient key as you fossil. So yeah, I don't anything else you want to show about the Yubikey manager? You guys may know the application better than I do.
No, I mean, it's pretty basic. It's not meant to be a sort of fancy tool. It's basically there just to help you sort of manage all the very basics of the key, right?
And just as someone who's paranoid by training and experience. I mean, my personal recommendation with these interfaces would be to turn everything off and enable them as you configure that particular usage. So I imagine OTP would probably be something that you'd use very early on, but just to be on the safe side, disable an interface until you're absolutely certain that you need it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a basic sort of cyber hygiene, right? You want to be sort of clean, don't leave any loose ends for people to attack if you don't need them to be there.
Well, we are coming up on the top of the hour, so you guys hinted that there's a new generation of YubiKeys coming out. Is there anything else Yubico is working on that that you want to call out?
Do we? I don't know if you want to talk about this. Do we want to talk about the bio key, John? Is that something you want to talk about at all or not?
I think we should table that for another time.
Oh, that's
But
perfectly all right.
there are cool things coming, but yeah.
Yeah,
We go through that on the show all the time. It's like, can we say that? Is that public yet?
We know all about the, oh, there's a really cool feature we want, oh, which we can't yet.
But what I heard was we have an excuse to bring you guys back on the show later on.
There you go.
Although
maybe-
we made Nate feel like a fossil, so I don't know if he's going to welcome us back.
I know, what the heck? Come
Hold
on.
him out on air. No, well,
So,
I'll bring you back just to heckle Nate some more.
Yeah, maybe as the feature set or the what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe as the features in IDM progress, maybe we'll have an updated episode on that, and we can have Yubico back on then.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, for a feature set that's only been out for the end of July, 3-ish months since RHEL 9.4 came out, it's amazing the amount of capability there is. Like just being able to log into the web console with a Yubikey is so cool, and to be able to do that from a mobile device. Oh, if only I had these technologies when I was a systems administrator. It would have been so nice to just pull out my phone, go to the web console, log in with my Yubikey, reboot the database, restart the database service that someone's complaining about, and then go back to my meal. Would have been fantastic. But just such an amazing space, so important. And for 25, $50, you can improve your security quite substantially, whether you're an individual user or whether you're at enterprise scale. I mean, right now you'd have to buy some YubiKeys, send them to your IT office to get set up. But as Yubico's Pre-reg becomes generally available, and as Identity Manager gets new updates, and I mean, we're looking at RHEL 9.5 here in a few months, so we'll see what lands there. I mean, it's just such a quickly evolving space, and something like a Yubikey alongside a password manager, I mean, all that combination really makes you feel like you stand a chance. Just don't read the news. So closing thoughts, Nate, any closing thoughts as we go around the horn?
If you aren't considering IDM, but you have a RHEL sub, you should be.
I definitely agree with you there. Check out the previous episode of RHEL Presents and stay tuned, because we'll have an identity management mini series here in a few months. So keep an eye out for that. Dave, closing thoughts.
Yeah, just very happy to have had the opportunity to chat with you, nice fellas, and yeah, happy to come back to heckle Nate anytime.
You have a permanent invitation to heckle Nate. I mean, to be a guest on RHEL Presents. Jonathan, how about you? Closing thoughts?
Just glad I had the opportunity to meet you in Denver as I did, and that worked towards this. I know we had a few hiccups on scheduling, but we finally made it, and this has been a great call. Thank you both for the time, and we really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Yeah, glad to have met you, and glad to have you both on the show. We had, I think, Jonathan, you and I took turns being sick, and then we had scheduling conflicts, and then Nate decided to travel and then take a week of vacation. It's just like, oh goodness. Sometimes summers are boring and slow. Other times it's
scheduling in summer is
crazy.
always hard.
So thank you both for joining us.
Next time we meet, Dave will be a married man.
Oh well, hey,
Congrats.
congratulations, or run. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I
Once a
don't know.
month,
Cynthia
so
watches
we're
these.
planning phases. So.
Depends what day you ask on, right?
My wife watches these, so hi, honey. I love you. Oh yeah, and Richard Rios, one of our Red Hatters, says update your passwords so that they're not summer 2024. Although that may be a good password, not summer 2024, with some
There you
special
go.
characters.
Totally throw everybody off.
We fixed it. All right, folks. On behalf of our guests, Jonathan and Dave from Yubico, and my co-host Nate, I've been Eric, the IT guy Hendricks. Really excited that you all joined us. Tune back in on Friday, where Nate and Scott will be on Into the Terminal. We'll be talking about troubleshooting. I think we're troubleshooting boot issues. And then
I think so. I still have to read the show notes for Friday, so sorry, folks. I just got back today. You got to give me time.
And then, so yeah, we've got Into the Terminal coming up on Friday. And then in 2 weeks, Brian Smith and I will be interviewing the Podman desktop team. We'll be talking about the built-in AI labs functionality that we released at Summit. So really excited about that, especially if you're interested in getting your hands on AI and trying something out on your local laptop. We'll be interviewing the team responsible for that. And then actually, speaking of Richard Rios, Rios and myself are getting spun up for an up and running with Red Hat Satellite mini series. We're looking 3 or 4 or 5 or 12 episodes. We haven't decided yet, but we'll be doing a number of episodes on how to install and then configure Red Hat Satellite. So yeah, Nate, Rios, I see you in chat. So yeah, I've called you out. It's official. And if you want to know when all these events will be, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button to kind of help goose our views on these episodes. Helps bring in some additional demand. So so if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do, and then hit that bell to get notified anytime we go live. So on behalf of our guests and the entire Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, thank you all for joining us for RHEL Presents, and we will see you again on Friday. Take care, everyone.
Have a great one.